hear me?
Yes, Srini, we are here. We are hearing you.
Hi, Srinivas. Yeah, you're able to hear.
Okay. Okay, so as I have told you, so as we have discussed in the last session, so these are our main concepts. Okay, so our grid, and so AMX BPM, and so AMX admin, and AMX BPM, so process and operational analytics. So by using Jasper soft. Okay, so our course has these 4 modules. Okay, so service grid, BPM, admin, and the process and operational analytics. BPM based, so process analytics and operational analytics. So these are the course content that we have. So one thing is that here, if you want to work with BPM, okay, if you want to work with this BPM, so you should be very perfect in administration. Okay, you should be very perfect in administration, because the BPM deployments, they're kind of difficult. Okay, the deployments of BPM application, they're little difficult. Okay, so if you want to be perfect in AMX BPM testing, developing, testing, and all those stuff, so you should know the AMX BPM also. I mean, AMX admin, you should be aware of. So otherwise, the learning will be very difficult for you. Okay, so first we will learn the basics of the service grid, then we will learn administration. Okay, we'll learn administration, then we'll learn BPM. Okay, so first we'll learn admin, so then we'll go ahead with BPM. So otherwise, as I said, it's very difficult for you to perform deployment and all. Okay, so now this AMX BPM is there. So AMX BPM, it follows many standards. Okay, the AMX BPM follows many standards. Okay, so it follows many standards. So the bottom layer, Okay, the bottom layer, so this is the OSGA container. Okay, this is OSGA container. Now this OSGA is based on Apache Felix. Okay, the ActiveMatrix OSGA container. Okay, ActiveMatrix OSGA container, so it is based on Apache Felix. Okay, it is based on Apache Felix. You can check that. Okay, to implement OSGA framework and service platform, so this is specially meant for embedded devices and component oriented applications or service oriented applications. Okay, so if you want to create the server based applications, the OSGA container is essential. Okay, the OSGA container is essential. So this AMX runtime at the bottom, so it will have the OSGA container. Okay, it will be having the OSGA container. Now on the top of that, so on the top of that, so you will be having SCA. Okay, on the top of that you will have SCA. So SCA stands for Service Component Architecture. So Service Component Architecture. So this SCA is the specification Okay, so this SCA specification, it is actually started by 3 enterprises. So 3 companies have started this SCA specification. So those companies are IBM, Oracle and TIBCO. So these 3 guys have come up with the concept Service Component Architecture. So this will provide, it's a model for composing applications that follow service oriented architecture. Okay, so when you want to build, your applications which follow SOA principles. Okay, when you want to build applications which follow service oriented architecture principles, so you have to use, okay, so you'll have to use the SCA architecture you have to use. Okay, you have to use SCA architecture. Okay, so this architecture you'll have to use. So this particular runtime, so is based on SCA. Now these two together, so they call it as SOA runtime. Okay, they call that as ActiveMatrix SOA runtime. So which is OSGA based and which follows SCA model. So on the top of this, so you will be having different containers. Okay, on the top of this you will be having different containers. So you will be having service grid. Now this is what you call a service grid. Okay, service grid container it is. Now this service grid container, okay, the service grid container, it is purely based on web services. Okay, the service grid container is purely based on web services. Now the service grid container itself, okay, the service grid container itself, so we'll be having so many more. So many more containers it will be having. So one of the container is BPM. Okay, one of the container is BPM. Okay, so one of the container is BPM. So this AMX BPM will be running on the top of your service grid framework. Okay, the AMX BPM will be running on the top of your service grid platform. Now this is what you call as BPM Engine. Okay, this particular part is what you call as BPM Engine. Now this AMX BPM Engine, okay, the AMX BPM Engine, so this is based on one specification which is called as BPL. Okay, it is based on one specification, that's what you call as BPL. So BPL stands for Business Process Execution Language. Okay, it is based on one specification, that's what you call as Business Process Execution Language. Okay, the Business Process Execution Language. So the BPM, AMX BPM, so it is built on the top of service grid, but the BPM runtime will also have one more specification, that's what you call as BPL Engine. So once again, this BPL Engine will be running on the top of your service grid. Okay, and similar to that, so you will be having various containers on the top of this service grid. So you will be having BWSC. Okay, you have one TIBCO component, one BW specific one, which is BWSC. Okay, so you'll be having one software which is called as BW Service Engine or BWSC. Now this BWSC, its future or its roadmap is it's going nowhere. Okay, I think in the coming years they want to discontinue this product. Okay, they want to discontinue the product because so recently they have released, I think 6 to 1 month back, they have released one new product which is the AMX BW version 6. Okay, they have released the version AMX BW version 6. So that is purely, that also follows this architecture. It is completely OSGA based and the entire development will be SCA based. Okay, and it is fully BPL spec it is. So going forward will be the BW version 6. But whereas BWSC, it is so this BWSC, so it is meant for only the BW version 5x. It's meant for only the BW version 5.x, like 5.10 or 5.11 or 5.12 like that. Okay, so the BWSC will be hosted within service grid runtime, and apart from that you will also have Spring component. So these are all containers, Spring. And it also will be having so another container as .NET C#. Okay, it will be having the .NET C# container. So it will be having the Java container. And it will be having C++ container. Okay, it will be having C++ container. So these all will be running on the top of your service grid. And the service grid will be having its own administrator. So that's what you call as AMX admin. Okay, that's what you call as AMX admin. So whereas BPM, so it will be having its own environment. So it will be having two environments. So one is open space. Okay, one is open space and other one is workspace. Okay, to work with your BPM applications at runtime, So to manage your BPM applications, you will be using Workspace or you will be using OpenSpace. So these two will be running within this BPM node. So they will be running within this. And for administering all these layers, you will be using the AMX administrator. Okay, AMX administrator. Now, so this is how the AMX server platform is. Okay, AMX platform will be like this. And you have one more. So that is policy director. Okay, one more is also there, which is called policy director. So that also you can install that separately. So that also will be running on the top of your service grid. Okay, which is called policy director. So these are the components which will be running in service grid environment. So you have Spring, you have C#, you have Java, you have C++, and you have BWSC. Okay, you have BWSC. And the most important thing I didn't mention here, so that is mediation. Okay, that's what you call as mediation. So earlier, this mediation component, it was different. Okay, so mediation component was different. So earlier, they were having two products. So one is ActiveMatrix Service Grid and another one is ActiveMatrix Service Bus they have. Okay, they were having two products. So one is ActiveMatrix Service Grid and other one is ActiveMatrix Service Bus. The service bus used to have only mediation, nothing else. Okay, the service bus of AMX, it used to have only one thing. Okay, so it used to have only one thing. So which is mediation, nothing else. Okay, so later on from the version 3.1, okay, from the version 3.1 of AMX, so they have combined service bus with service grid. So it used to be like this. So it is kind of visually exclusive. If you have a service bus, okay, if you have service bus, you will get only mediation. Okay, you will get only mediation. And similarly, if you have only service grid, you're not going to get mediation. Okay, you're not going to get mediation. So customers started facing issues because it's kind of too silly it is. So they wanted to have one common platform where all will be provided. So that's why from version 3.1, okay, from version 3.1, so they started offering, okay, they started offering the mediation as well as this container approach. So everything they started providing. Okay. Now, okay, so why exactly you have, what is the purpose of having Spring containers, C++ containers, Java containers, and C# containers? And what exactly the meaning of service grid here? Okay, what exactly the meaning of service grid here? So they call this product as service grid. The reason is, it's pretty simple here. Now just think of the normal BW. Okay, think of the normal BW. The BW, how exactly it works? Now let's say I have a Java integration. Okay, I have Java integration. So how exactly you do your Java integration? You will have the jar file, right? You will have the jar file, and based on that, okay, based on that, you will configure the methods. Okay, based on that, you will configure the method. So which means the complete development, okay, complete development will be externally done. Okay, will be externally done, and the BW will be acting as Java client. Okay, the BW will be acting as Java client. So usually you get client jars you will get. Now let's say I'm having some EJBs. Okay, I'm having some EJBs. So what you get, you'll get EJB client jar files you will get. And similarly, if I'm having RMI, so I will be getting RMI client jar files I will be getting. So which means the major functionality will be running outside of BW engine. Okay, the major things, the business logic will be running outside of BW engine. So your BW engine will be acting only as a client application. Okay, will be acting as only client application. So they will maintain the server component separately, and they will maintain your BW will be acting as the client application. And here, in the case of the grid environment, your applications will be hosted, whether they are C++ or whether they are Java or whether they are Spring, they will be hosted within service grid only. So which means the life cycle of those applications, okay, the life cycle of those applications will be managed by the service grid itself. Okay, the life cycle of those applications will be managed by service grid only. But in the case of BW, it cannot manage the life cycle of the Java applications. Okay, it cannot manage the life cycle of the Java server applications. It can only manage the client Java client part only it can manage. But whereas here, the entire Spring features, the C# features, the Java features and C++ features, so everything will be managed by service grid itself. So lifecycle events or lifecycle methods will be executed by service grid only. Okay, and the garbage collections and all these things will be done by service grid itself. So everything will be managed by service grid only. So that's why, so they call this as a grid, because in one runtime, okay, in one runtime you can deploy multiple types of applications. Okay, in one runtime you can deploy multiple types of applications. So that's why this platform is called as service grid. It's a grid where collection of different components can be running. Okay, and they will be interconnected. Now, how exactly you can communicate or you can enable communication between C# and Java? Now, let's say I have certain functionality which is written in C#. Okay, which is written in C#. So that particular functionality, I want to access it from a Java application. Okay, that particular functionality, I want to access it from Java application. So what exactly it will be doing here? So usually, so if you want to call one class from other class, what you do? We simply create an instance and then you will call it. Okay, you'll be calling it. So that is, as long as the applications are running in one JVM. Applications running in one JVM and applications are written in one language, you will use that particular functionality. So where you will create the classes and you will call it. But as the JVMs are different, okay, as the JVMs are different or as the languages are different, you cannot do that here. Okay, you cannot do that. So in other platforms, such as Oracle Service Bus, what they do is, so they will be using RMI. Okay, they will use RMI or they will use this one, EJBs. Okay, they will be using RMI or they will be using EJBs to enable communication between them. So one application will be acting as RMI client and one will be acting as RMI server. Or one will be acting as EJB client and other one will be acting as EJB server application. So using EJB implementations and RMI implementations, they enable communication between two components. But whereas here, you are dealing with different languages. Okay, dealing with different languages like C#, C++ and all those stuff. So you cannot use RMI and you cannot use EJB also. And you can use Corba, but that became too old. So what exactly the TIBCO has done? So what exactly TIBCO has done is the component communication will be enabled through web services only. Okay, the component communication will be enabled through web services only. So this is the major advantage of TIBCO ActiveMatrix platform, because here everything is web services only from the ground up. Okay, from the ground up it is fully built on web services only. But whereas other platforms, okay, Oracle Service Bus is there. It's quite famous, it is. But you will have SOA implementation only at the top level. Okay, only at the top level you will have SOA implementation. But internally they're still based on older technologies only, like RMI, EJBs and all those stuff. Okay, but this is only the platform, so which is completely built on web services. So here no old technologies are implemented, no RMI, no CORBA or no EJBs and all. So pure web services it is. Okay, completely based on web services. So what this platform will do is, it will always assume that, okay, it will always assume that one component is service provider and one component is web service client. It always assumes that one component is web service client and one component is web service provider. Okay, it always assumes that, and based on that assumption that connection, communication will happen between these components. So that's why in the future, okay, this platform will be more stable. Okay, right now it's it's very difficult for them to implement all the latest features on this brand new platform, because when you're creating a new platform it will take some time to to have proper bug fixing and all those stuff. So that's why, so in the future, going forward, so this platform will become stronger and stronger, because it is fully based on the open standards like web services. Okay, so in the coming, maybe in the next version, apart from web services, they will also provide REST services. Okay, they will be providing REST interfaces also. They will be providing. Okay, but for now, these components will communicate through web services only. So due to this approach, the service grid is different from other ESB platform, because when it comes to SOA, the role of service grid, okay, the role of service grid is ESB. So ESB stands for Enterprise Service Bus. Okay, ESB stands for Enterprise Service Bus. So the role of service grid is Enterprise Service Bus. Okay, so out of all the ESBs, this is the one, so which is completely different from other ESB vendors. In other ESB platforms, like we have Oracle Service Bus. In Oracle Service Bus, you can only host Spring applications and you can only host Java applications. Okay, you can only host Spring and Java applications, but you cannot host C# and C++. Okay, you cannot host C# and C++. You can only call them. You can only call them externally, like BW, but they cannot be co-hosted side by side with your Java or Spring platforms. Okay, so similarly, the .NET based you have the BizTalk server is there. Okay, BizTalk server is there, integration platform or ESB platform. So that can only host the .NET components only it can host. Okay, it can only host .NET components. So apart from that, it can't do that. So everyone has that drawback. BizTalk can only host .NET, and this Oracle Service Bus or Progress ESB. So these days they only host Java and Spring, but they cannot host C# and C# and the C++ and all this stuff. But whereas Service Grid, it can host all types of applications. It can host. Okay. So you have mediation, you have policy director. So that's for governance. So if you want to implement governance, you will be using policy director. Service governance, like for performing authentication and authorization, for digital certificate verification, for message encryption, and for all these things, you will be using the policy director. And it is very good product from, that's also pretty good component from this ActiveMatrix platform. So now you have the BWSC. Okay, BWSC. So frankly, previously I used to cover BWSC in the same course. But right now I'm not covering the BWSC because, as I said, in the future, so they're not going to use this BWSC. Okay. So that's why I'm not covering in the course. If you guys want, I will show you one simple scenario. Doesn't matter. But so what exactly is the purpose of the BWSC? Now, if you're aware of the BW, the product roadmap, so how it is actually started and how it is evolved. So when BW was started, there was no SOA concepts. I mean, but kind of initial stage it was. Okay, there was no SOA concept. So when BW was started, it was purely meant for enterprise application integration only. Okay, so it was purely meant for enterprise application integration. But later on, excuse me, okay. So initially when BW was started, so there was SOA concepts was in very initial stage. So that's why, so you are not having even the SOAP palette and service palette also. Okay, you're not having the SOAP palette and service palette also. You started having SOAP palette only from version 5.3. Okay, only from version 5.3 you started having SOAP palette. And from version 5.8 or 5.7 I guess, you started having service palette. So that's why, so whatever applications you develop using BW, okay, whatever applications you develop using BW, they are essentially meant for, EAA only. Okay, they are meant for EAA only. And you provide add-on features as web services. Okay, you provide add-on features as web services. So you do have web services feature, but having web services feature doesn't make your platform as SOA platform. Okay, having web services feature doesn't make your platform as the SOA platform. So when you say SOA, you must follow complete SOA principles. You have to follow. The SOA says that everything should be in the form of web services only. Whatever you do, everything should be in the form of web services only. Okay, everything should be in the form of web services. The integration that you do should be in the form of web services. And whatever business logic you perform, that also should follow one specification, which is BPM. Okay, that also should follow a specification BPM. So like that, many things it states. But the basic BW platform, it doesn't follow any of those principles. So very few of them it will follow, like web services support, XML support, SOAP support, WSDL support and all. But it doesn't support the main thing, which is the runtime should be web services based, and the integration should be web services based, and the business logic also should be done only on the web services. So that's generally what you call as service orchestration. So due to this reason, the BW cannot be certified as fully SOA platform integration platform. But they do project it as SOA. But the people who are aware of SOA concepts, they don't certify BW as SOA. But whereas now, many of the TIBCO customers, they actually started, at least they're in the starting position of the SOA features, the SOA platform. So from TIBCO, the SOA solution you have, this ActiveMatrix you have. So this is the SOA platform from TIBCO. Okay. So let's say for example, you already have the projects which are developed using EAI. Okay, you already have the projects which are developed using the core BW platform. But for the new requirements, you are using Service Grid. Okay, for the new requirements, you started using the fully SOA. Now you will be having two administrators. One administration to deploy and manage your Service Grid based applications, and another administrator to deploy BW applications and managing BW applications. So you have to maintain two different administrators. You have to maintain, and they must be running separately. TIBCO administrator, he can't do anything of AMX administrator, and similarly the ActiveMatrix administrator can't do anything of the normal TIBCO administrator. So even though you have two platforms, so each one will be running separately only. The BW plus TIBCO administrator, that is separate environment, and Service Grid and AMX administrator separate environment. But what if you want that? Okay, what if you want that your older BW projects, which are nothing but classic BW projects. So when it comes to AMX SOA, whatever projects you develop in BW, that's what you call as classic BW projects. Okay, they're called as classic BW projects. If you want to manage, if you want to co-host, your classic BW projects along with the grid-based applications. Along with grid-based applications, what exactly you have to do? So you don't want to use two administrative environments. You don't want to use two administrative environments. You want to use only AMX environment you want to use. And that too, you want that the BW applications lifecycle also should be managed by the AMX administrator only. The AMX administrator only should do the deployment as well as the lifecycle management of your deployed BW applications. So in that case, what exactly you have to do? So in that case, you will be, if you want to completely remove, the TIBCO administrator dependency. If you want to completely remove the TIBCO administrator dependency, and you want to host your classic BW projects along with this the new components which are SES certified, then you require the BW service engine. Okay, then you require BW service engine. So what you're going to do, you will be taking the BW project. Okay, you'll be taking the BW project. Okay, you'll be taking the BW project and you will be so it's very simple steps you will perform for your classic BW project. Okay, for classic BW project, okay, for classic BW project, so what you're going to do is you will provide, okay, so you will take one service activity you will take, okay, you will take one service agent activity and then you will set the type as, okay, so you will set the type as AMX, okay, instead of using soap binding, instead of specifying soap binding, you will be setting the type as AMX. So then that particular application you're going to import. Okay, that particular application you're going to import into BWSC. So which is nothing but you'll import that into Business Studio. Okay, you'll import that into Business Studio and you'll create an archive file and then you're going to deploy it. So when you do that, so that whatever application you have, that will be taken care by BWSC. Okay, that will be taken care by BWSC. Okay, so if at all you want to use your classic BW projects, or if at all you want that the life cycle of your classic BW project should be managed along with the AMX server platform, you require the BWSC you require. Okay, you require the BWSC. Okay, you require the BWSC. Okay, so and there you have the mediation. Okay, you have the mediation. Now, if you keep the BWSC aside, okay, if you keep BWSC aside, the Spring, C++, Java, C#, so these are all required coding. So you have to do the coding and then only you can actually run them. But whereas the mediation, okay, mediation is the most important in service grid because, so this is where without performing any kind of coding, okay, without performing any kind of coding, you will be working with the web services. Okay, when you work with the mediation, you are not going to do any kind of coding here. It is pure XSLT based. Okay, the mediation component, it is completely based on XSLT. Okay, and this mediation component itself is based on one more standard. Okay, it's based on one more standard, that is Apache CXL. Okay, it is based on one more Apache CXL. Okay, so it's based on that platform. It's based on that framework. Okay, it's based on one more standard, which is what you call as so Apache CXL. Okay. Okay, it is based on one more framework which is called Apache CXF. Okay, so here, so you will be performing same like BW. So zero coding approach, so development you will perform in the mediation. And apart from that, you can also perform many things like the service virtualization, routing, many things you will be doing. So that you will be seeing as part of the course. But here, when you say mediation, so you will be having zero coding based development you will have. And the mediation purposes, its actual purpose is different, that we'll discuss later on. Okay. Now the BPM, so it is a workflow engine. Okay, the BPM is nothing but it's a BPM is specially meant for human creating or allowing human to human interaction. Okay, human to human interaction, or so you can also call it as business process automation. So when you want to have business process automation, you will be using this BPM component. Now this BPM component, it is actually based on two specifications. One is BPL. It is based on BPL specification, and at the same time it is also based on one more specification, that's what you call as BPL for people. Okay, that's also what you call as BPL for people. Okay, one more specification is there, BPL for people. So the BPL engine will be taking care of your service calls. Okay, will be taking care of your service calls. And whereas the BPL for people will be taking care of the human interactions. Okay, that will be taking care of the human interactions. So this particular component, so is the one, so which will be running on the top of your service grid. So if you have a license for AMX BPM, okay, if you have a license for AMX BPM, so automatically you will be having license for service grid also. But reverse is not the case. So if you have a license for only service grid, you're not going to get BPM component. If you get BPM, then you will get service grid. Okay, then only you will be getting service grid. So in the coming versions, once again, you will not be having two separate editions like that, service grid and BPM. So I think they're going to combine both of them. Okay, they will combine both of them and they will provide one unified platform for you. So you don't require separate licenses for them. You take BPM license, you will get service grid. Okay, like that. So this is the ActiveMatrix server platform. Okay, it is ActiveMatrix server platform. Now what exactly this SCA states that, or why do you require this SCA, and what exactly SCA states that? So SCA states three things. So mainly it states three things. One is components. One is components, one is bindings. Okay, one is bindings. Okay, components, bindings and wiring or assembly. Okay, from development perspective, so the SCA states these three things. Okay, SCA states these three things from development perspective. Components, bindings and wiring, or that's what you call as assembly. So if you see the diagram of this SCA, it's pretty clear it is. Okay, it is pretty clear. So from this, now this is how you will be having the SCA composite. So here you call your application as composite application. Okay, so whatever you do in AMX platform, So ultimately, that's nothing but a composite only. Okay, that will be nothing but composite only. So what exactly is SCS states that? SCS states that the business logic, you cannot write your business logic according to your own your own fancies. You have to represent your business logic in the form of SCA component. Okay, you have to represent your business logic in the form of SCA component. So what are the types of SCA components available? So Java is there, Web is there, Spring is there, C# is there, C++ is there. Okay, C++ is there, BPL is also there. So like that, so specific components it will state. So it will state that your business logic should be defined in SCA components. The available components are, as I said, the C++, Java, Spring, these things. These are all components. You must define business logic in the form of SCA components only. No process definitions like that. Okay, no customizing things here. Okay, and it also states that whatever functionality the component will provide. Okay, whatever functionality that component provide, that functionality must be specified in an interface. Okay, whatever services the component will implement. Okay, whatever services that component will implement, the services information it should provide in the form of interface. So the interface is nothing but WSDL file. Okay, the interface is nothing but WSDL file. So okay, the interface is nothing but WSDL file. Now if you are aware of the WSDL concept, you will be having port types. Okay, the WSDL will be having port types. So each port type is nothing but one interface. And in each port type you define web service operations. Okay, you define web service operations in each port type. So your application should implement all the operations of that port type. Your application is supposed to implement all the operations of that port type. So let's say I have two port types I am having. Okay, I am having two port types, like one is customer and other one is order. Under customer port type I am having like create customer and update customer address. Okay, update customer address and synchronize the new customer information. So these are the three operations I have. So SCS states that when you are implementing customer interface, you are supposed to implement all those three web service operations. Okay, all those three web service operations you are supposed to implement. Okay, so the business logic of your component will be represented by your abstract WSDL port type web service operations implementation. Okay, so here components are mandatory and interfaces are mandatory. So interfaces are nothing but WSDL files. So essentially your development of SOA always starts from WSDL files. Without WSDL files you cannot do any development in SOA. Okay, in SOA without WSDLs there is no development here. Okay, but in BW that's not the case. So web service is only optional for you, because as I said, the BW is not fully SOA certified platform. But here this AMX grid is fully certified SOA platform. So that's why here the development itself will be started from web services. So you have to create the web service and you define port types in that web service. And for each interface implementation or port type implementation, you may need one SCA component or you may need multiple SCA components. Okay, multiple SCA components. Okay, so that it states. And one more thing also it will state. It states that if the component role is service provider, okay, the component role is service provider, you should specify that in the form of service. Okay, you should specify that in the form of service. Now you can see this one. The bill service component is there. Now this is acting as service provider. Okay, this is acting as service provider for this restaurant service component. Okay, the bill service component is acting as web service provider for this restaurant service component. So this is acting as a client and this is acting as a provider. And at the same time, this is acting as client of this VAT service component and tip service component. So how can you define the roles here? Okay, how can you define the roles here? So you cannot use SOAP event source activity or SOAP request reply, something like that here. If you want to indicate that you are a service provider, you will be specifying service. Now this you can see this part. So this indicates that this component is acting as web service provider. And at the same time, if you want to call external components, or if you want to call other components, or if your role is web service client, okay, if your role is web service client, you have to specify that in the form of reference. Okay, in the form of reference. Just think that service provider or the service is nothing but SOAP event source activity in BW. The reference is nothing but SOAP request reply activity. The web service client role, reference. The provider role, service. That the SES takes. So when you want to have a service client role, you need to specify that in the form of reference. When you want to have the role of provider, you have to specify that in the form of service. Okay, you have to specify that in the form of service. And then it also states that the components will be connected through wiring. Okay, components will be connected through the wiring. And all these components will be configured in a composite. Okay, all these components will be configured in the form of composite. So there in BW, you will be having process archive. You will be having process archive. So, but here, so you will be having composite. So composite is a deployable solution. Okay, composite is a deployable solution. So you will be deploying each composites you will be deploying. And each composites will be having multiple SCA components. Okay, so that what exactly SCS is. It's pretty simple and it is excellent specification it is. Okay, so initially you find it little a tricky thing, but once you start implementing, you find that this is the best way of implementing applications. Okay, so that's all for today. So rest we'll see tomorrow. Okay, so any queries?
Thank you, Sri. Got it everything. Sri, actually we'll go through the documentation and we'll come back on this. Hello?
Any queries? Harsha and SK, do you guys have any queries?
No, Srinivas. Going forward, we might have few queries. It is the initial stage, right?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. So good night to all. See you tomorrow.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, good night.